Hi everyone. Well, I know this is a little late, but I thought I would just record one more video about the exam, which is tomorrow. I hope as many of you get to see it as possible. I just wanted to whiz over quickly the kind of stuff that I think you should be revising and just speak very briefly about the material we went over in the lecture last week. So let's start with induction and deduction. Remember that a deductive argument is an argument whereby if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. Okay? So examples might be things like either Bob is a fireman or a policeman. That would be premise 1. Premise 2, he's not a fireman. Conclusion, he's a policeman. Okay, the conclusion has to be true if the premises are true. That's a valid deductive argument. Inductive argument, there are lots of different ways of cashing it out. There are lots of different versions of what an inductive argument is. But what we've said is that it's really any argument that's not a deductive argument. That is to say, it's an argument according to which, even if the premises are true, it's at least logically possible for the conclusion to be false. Even with a good inductive argument, the conclusion it's logically possible for the conclusion to be false, even if the premises are true. Examples of that tend to involve either moving from observations of single instances to universal generalizations. So things like, this raven is black, and this raven is black, and this raven is black, therefore all ravens are black. Or perhaps this raven is black, and this raven is black, and this raven is black, to, the next raven I observe will also be black. Okay, so that's your inductive argument, deductive argument distinction. Okay, so knowledge is justified true belief, the tripartite account of knowledge. Knowledge is justified true belief. That is to say, one knows that P if the proposition P is true, one believes that the proposition P is true, and one has justification for believing that the proposition is true. So you might believe that, the table is made of wood. Okay, so this table is made of wood. It is made of wood, so it's true. Okay. I believe that it's made of wood. I do. I believe that it's made of wood, and I'm justified in believing that it's made of wood. I mean, I'm sat right in front of it. I can touch it. It feels like wood. It looks like wood. And so I know that the table is made of wood. Okay, it's true. I believe it to be true, and I'm justified in believing it is true. That is the tripartite account of knowledge. It says that justified true belief is necessary and sufficient for knowledge. Gettier cases are cases of justified true belief that are not cases of knowledge. So a Gettier case, the aim of a Gettier case, the aim of Gettier's was to show that knowledge is not justified true belief. Right? Justified true belief is not necessary and sufficient for knowledge. So what is a Gettier case? As I say, it's a case of justified true belief that isn't knowledge. There are plenty of examples. The one that I explained in class was about Smith and Jones and having 10 coins in his pocket and so on. You can go back to the lecture slides and check that out for a little more detail. The other that I didn't go through in the lecture involves a disjunction. That is, disjunctions are sort of an or, A or B. So let's go through this case. So suppose you know that I've just bought a car. You know that I've just bought a car, and you're justified in believing that I've bought a Ferrari. Okay, that's your justification. You know that I love Ferraris. Okay, I'm a massive fan of Ferraris, and I'm a millionaire, and I bought a car. So there's your justification for thinking that I've bought a Ferrari. You know that I want a car, that I've bought a car, and that I love Ferraris. So there's your justification. You're justified in believing that I've bought a Ferrari. Okay. Now, the proposition, Ben has bought a Ferrari, entails that the proposition Ben has either bought a Ferrari or Ben has bought a Ford Mondeo is true, right? It entails that proposition. Okay, so just as Ben has bought an apple entails Ben has either bought an apple or an orange, right? The same goes for the Ferrari and the Ford Mondeo. Now suppose, in fact, I bought a Ford Mondeo. Okay, so if I bought a Ford Mondeo, you'll believe that I either bought a Ferrari or I bought a Ford Mondeo is true. Okay, but it's true in virtue of the fact that I bought the Ford Mondeo, not in virtue of the fact that I bought the Ferrari. And you had no reason to believe that I bought a Ford Mondeo whatsoever. So out of justified true belief, it's justified and true because of one part. It's justified because you're justified in believing that I'm going to buy a Ferrari, and because you're justified in believing that I'm going to buy a Ferrari, you're justified in believing I'm either going to buy a Ferrari or I'm going to buy a Ford. Right? It's true because I buy a Ford. Okay? So, in essence, the source of the justification is not the source of the truth. Right? The source of my justification was the Ferrari side of it. Right? The reason it's true is that I bought a Ford Mondeo. Right? So there's a case of a justified true belief. Another case of justified true belief that's not a case of knowledge. And so the Gettier cases seem to prove, at least, that knowledge is not simply justified true belief. Okay, so there's that stuff. Again, refer to the lecture slides. Okay, what else did we go through? Let me get here. Free will and determinism. Okay. So, free will, so far as we're concerned, is nothing to do with freedom of speech, freedom of movement, political freedom. I'm not interested, at least not in this debate, we're not interested in the end of apartheid and how the black population gained freedom in 1994, and so on. That's not what this debate is about. Okay, when I'm talking about the free will and determinism debate, I'm talking more about the kind of freedom that gives one moral responsibility. Okay, so if I freely do something, that's what makes me morally accountable for doing that thing. And when we ask whether freedom and determinism are compatible, what we're asking is whether I should be held morally accountable for my actions if determinism is true. So why should we worry about this? Well, determinism is the thesis that given the prior facts, so all the facts about the universe as they stand, and the laws of nature, things like the law of gravity, law of electromagnetism, and so on, all future facts are determined. They're fixed. Okay? Given my history, given what's happened, given even going right back to the birth of the universe, given what's happened in the past, given the way things are, and that the laws govern these things, they determine what's going to happen in the future, the whole future is just fixed. It's set out, and that includes my actions. Right? That includes the decisions that I'm going to make. But if the decisions that I'm going to make are fixed already, so if it's already determined that tomorrow morning when I wake up and decide and wonder whether I'm going to have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, if it's already decided now that I'm going to have a cup of coffee, it seems odd to say that I'm responsible for that decision. Maybe that's not the best example. Let's take a more moral example. Okay, so suppose I'm stood at the top of a cliff, and use a similar example to that we used previously. I'm stood at the top of a cliff, and my friend Bob is stood there, and he's suicidal. I can choose to either push him off the cliff or not push him off the cliff, and maybe try and persuade him not to commit suicide. Now, if I really do have free will, okay, then I'm held morally accountable for my actions. I choose what to do. I can either choose to push him off, in which case, that's morally bad, or I could try desperately hard to persuade him to come down, and that would be, in a sense, praiseworthy. But what if it were already determined, not by me? What if I didn't really have free will? What if my actions were predetermined by the laws of nature? It seems like there's nothing I could have done about it. I mean, if I pushed him off, it was always predetermined by the laws of physics, right? That I was always going to push him off. So how can I be held morally responsible for that act? Similarly, if the laws of nature determined that I was going to persuade him to, not to jump off, then how could that be praiseworthy? How could I be praised when really I had nothing to do with it? I kind of had something to do with it in that I did it, but I was always going to. It wasn't. There's a certain agency that's missing there. Okay, that's the general idea. Now, incompatibilists, they're the kind of people that think, no, freedom and determinism are not compatible. If determinism is true, that is, if all your actions are governed by prior facts and the laws of nature, then you just don't have free will. You are not to be held morally responsible for your actions. Okay? You are not morally accountable for anything that you do. Okay, so that's your incompatibilists. This includes two groups, hard determinists and libertarians. Now, hard determinists think that you're not free because they think determinism is true. Libertarians, on the other hand, although they are incompatibilists because they think that freedom and determinism are incompatible, they think that we do have free will. You may ask, how's that possible? Well, it's quite simple, really. It's because they believe that determinism is false. Determinism doesn't necessarily have to be true. It could be that we live in a chancy world where the future's not set in stone. And if the future's not set in stone, unlike what the determinists are saying, if the future's not set in stone, then there's nothing preventing us from having freedom, so say the libertarians. But there's another group. This group is called either soft determinism or compatibilism. So the compatibilists, they say that you're free. There's a lot of noise going on outside. I'm just going to pause it now and then I'll start again in 2 minutes.